Hello and welcome back to the Wisely Automotive channel. I've just got back from a day on the road in the mobile service van servicing and repairing BMW i3s, and I thought I'd share a quick story with you. As you can probably expect, we come across a lot of previous repairs to faults or issues. In fact, I'd go as far as saying over 50% of what we do is either a direct or indirect consequence to someone having done a repair or attempted a repair previously. That said, what I've found or stumbled upon today is probably the worst case. So with the customer's consent, I started filming it and I will share it with you now. I thought I'd document this because it's the kind of thing that we come across quite often, and also because I feel bad for this particular customer. The booking was to supply and fit a replacement lifter motor for the driver's window. It's a common issue due to water ingress getting in to this connector here and often taking out the motor as well. We've covered it plenty of times, but the symptoms are the window won't drop down when you open the door, and also when you press the button here, it will drop down in stages rather than smoothly all in one go. Also, it won't fold up when you lock it on the key and things like that. Now, in most cases, we would be first to the scene. We would take the door card off or the door skin off, as I've done here, undress this and find out what's happened. First and foremost, we have to repair the wiring, because usually that is what goes first. Sometimes you can just plug it back into the existing lifter motor once everything's cleaned up and it lives to fight another day. Sometimes though, you do have to replace the lifter motor. There's also times where it will all work without replacing the lifter motor, and then shortly after it will start failing again. So almost while you're here and paying for the labor of taking the door skin off and everything, it's almost best just to repair the wiring and replace the motor. It's so common that it's even on our fixed price menu. However, in this case, things are slightly different because this particular customer has actually already had this attended to by a BMW main dealer. They went in for a diagnosis that was about £300, and they were told that they will need a new wiring harness and also a mirror for some reason. Now, obviously, we didn't have any communication with the customer at that point, and being a main dealer, he thought he was in safe hands, so he continued on with what was being suggested. In terms of what was actually done, I have the invoice from the BMW main dealer in front of me. It totals £1,462, and that's in addition to the original or the initial visit the customer made to the same main dealer for £719 a few weeks, about 10 days prior. As far as the big invoice, the £1,462 invoice goes, we've got replacing the mirror assembly and also the wiring harness. And at the bottom of the invoice, it does indeed confirm that the window now opens and closes, however it does bit by bit. Further diagnosis required. The customer lost faith, having already spent the best part of £2,000 and rang us. We explained that, well, it's not unusual that sometimes if you repair the wiring, or in this case replace the whole harness, it can still be temperamental or not work how it is, because the motor should have been swapped as well. We even carry the lifter motors on the van because it's such a common repair. But with the backstory in mind, and having been told that the wiring loom had already been changed, we thought we are just coming to take the door skin off, replace the lifter motor, inspect the repair or the replacement of the wiring loom, and that would be everything done. But this is where things didn't quite look as expected. When I got to work, the first thing that struck me was how well the door skin had been put back on. I mean, so well that it almost looks factory fresh. There's little giveaways. For example, this trim, however hard you try, often it just bends a little bit on removal, and as a result it won't quite sit flush here or here. And also, for example, two little grommets here that you have to remove to take the door handle off. Usually people will pry on this one rather than popping it out from behind like we do. So with all these things in mind, it did strike me that the door skin had been put on exceptionally well. Having then revealed the area I'll be working at, things got a bit confusing because the wiring hadn't been repaired, but then the customer reminded me that actually the wiring loom had been replaced. But then this is the wiring loom here, and this is the sticker, and it confirms a production date of June 2019. Now, this car was built in July 2019. This is not a new wiring loom. In fact, no one has been here. This mirror hasn't been replaced, and I've loosened this off already, but if we open this connector, here is the fundamental issue that's causing all of the customer's problems. And none of this wiring has been repaired, nor has the wiring loom been replaced, which is what the customer thinks they have been charged for. And if we look here, this is pretty much a textbook case where the motor is likely burnt out as well. So going back to the invoice that the customer was supplied, what on earth happened? Because they've been charged over £2,000 in total, and yet absolutely nothing has actually been done. On closer inspection, if we look at the listed parts, focusing on the wiring harness, the part number ends in 972. Cross-checking with the official parts diagram, and the driver's wiring harness ends in 962. The passenger co-driver side ends 972. What have they bought? The passenger side parts. So all the work was carried out on the left side of the car, where the customer had no issues at all. This mirror has been replaced, God knows why. And if we look in here, as expected, we've got telltale signs that someone has worked here. And like I said, everything's starting to become clear because this trim hasn't been quite installed perfectly. Now, this isn't my fight to fight, nor am I getting involved. I'm simply here to do the job, and I will do the job. In fact, now I need to do more than what I thought I will have to do. Goes without saying, we'll be replacing this as planned, but also I now need to allow an extra hour to replace this. Luckily, we have all the parts, all the repair kits, and even a spare housing if necessary. So it's fiddly and I don't have much time, so I will be cracking on with that. So there we have it, all the wiring's repaired. Managed to clean up and reuse the actual connector block, and I did test the old lifter motor and it wasn't working. All that's left to do is to dress the door back up using 6 new clips, not the 21 clips that the main dealer invoiced for. And if I demonstrate now, working as it should, all the functionality that the customer didn't have and is absolutely textbook for a faulty hall sensor has now been restored. If I unlock it, put the window down, it's dropping down as it should, and the one touch function for lowering the window is now working. So everything has been resolved. Now, obviously we weren't expecting to carry out the wire repair, but luckily we carry everything on the van and we had just about enough time to do it, meaning the customer doesn't have to take yet another day out of their schedule to get this sorted. Look, mistakes and miscommunication can happen, but we wanted to understand why things went so wrong. The customer in the meantime found a copy of the original diagnosis invoice for £719, and I've got a copy of it here. So let's have a look at what's actually listed. And it says, investigate and report on driver's side door window does not go up or down. It also then goes on to say, carried out investigation, fault stored for no communication of mirror electrics and window. Water has entered driver's door and has corroded wiring harness and mirror electrics. So there's 2 takeaways from this. Firstly, it clearly says drivers multiple times. And secondly, we get a little bit of an insight as to why they might have replaced the mirror. It says, due to fault code stored for no communication of mirror electrics. If you are paying close attention to the footage that's already been shown, you might have noticed that the car's got aftermarket indicators in the mirrors. They kind of swipe left to right. Now, the customer's installed those himself, and obviously to have installed them, he must have disconnected it. So my hunch is that those were the error codes that were stored, and of course, because he's replaced both sides, there were codes for the passenger side. Is that where the mistake happened? I don't know, but it is, in my opinion, the only thing that was wrong with the mirror electrics. So if I had to guess, it's those erroneous codes which were caused by the customer disconnecting his mirror indicators that brought so much focus on the mirror assembly, and potentially why some focus started being put on the left-hand side of the car. If we revisit the diagram for the door harness, there's another chance that some mistakes happen there. And I've actually been caught out by this before in the past. The issue is that the diagram that's used shows a left-hand drive car, but we obviously have a right-hand drive car here in the UK. And in this case, you don't follow the diagram, you follow the wording, and in the wording it says drivers or co-drivers, because obviously the harnesses will have different functions. The driver one will have more functionality for mirror controls, etc. This is rare, and I think it only applies to maybe one or two other things such as wiper motors and stuff like that, but it is a trap because it can be quite easy to just see left hand side, click left, and that's the part number it gives. You've got to actually focus on the wording of the part. Okay, so the wrong parts were ordered. We know that as a fact because we have the part numbers that the customers paid for. And then they were fitted to the wrong side of the car. We're not 100% sure of this, but they certainly weren't fitted to the right-hand side. And there are those little giveaways that something has happened on the left. So yeah, that's not 100%, but something's been replaced, and it sure as hell wasn't the driver's side. Now at the end of this, a technician would have finished the job and then concluded that further diagnosis is required because the driver's window is still not working. How does that even happen? How have you just finished working on the passenger side, supposedly or seemingly, and then go, well, the driver's side's still not working? I just don't get it. I appreciate that in this video we're discussing the work of another company, notably a BMW main dealer, and we're not looking to make any accusations or anything. On the contrary, I'm here just to lay out the facts, and throughout this I was not skeptical but sort of reserved and trying to keep an open mind on all this, because the invoice that I was presented on the day for the final works for almost £1,500, they do actually state left or right. However, the part numbers are there for the left hand side. So I did really want to get sight of that original diagnosis invoice from the customer, and once they sent it over and it says clear as day that it's a driver's side issue, really at that point I realized that a serious mistake's happened here, and ultimately a customer has been left nearly £2,200 out of pocket. Don't forget that in addition the customer then also had to pay our invoice, and that was £410, including the £40 travel fee for the mobile service in Zone A. If you've not been watching the videos, you can see somewhere on the screen how the zoning works. So yeah, a lot of expense for the customer, and that really doesn't sit well with me. You know, the customer went to a BMW main dealership expecting expertise, and we do often find that although they do have general BMW expertise, that doesn't necessarily mean i3 expertise. So I put this video out. Look, we're not looking to accuse, disparage or anything. We're just looking to tell a story and show you this example. We get a lot of customers, especially on the buying and selling side of our business, who we know, despite sort of singing our praises, they will just go and buy from a main dealer because they really do believe that that stands for a lot. Well, this isn't a one-off example. We do hear these kind of things quite often. This is probably one of the worst cases I've seen, not actually in terms of financial loss, but just in terms of how simple and obvious the actual resolution was. The customer is going to go back to the other business and lay out the facts and explain that he's unhappy with what happened, and fair is fair. If there's a positive outcome to that, we will update the story by leaving a comment below.